welcome back to Ahead of the Curve, the Scoliosis Experience. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Teed, and today we're going to be talking about aging with scoliosis and what to expect at every decade. So we'll be talking about what to expect in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. And before we jump into that topic, I'd like to talk a little bit about some questions that have come up with client experiences, and also some questions that have come up on Instagram through people trying to problem solve some pain that they're having. So the first thing I want to talk about is an interaction I had with one of my clients this week. She has been off of work for a while and she just started a new job. So she's working as an LPN and taking vital signs of people. And so she's measuring people's blood pressure, their heart rate, respiratory rate, things like that. And she is doing quite a bit of that. So she's doing probably 60 people a day. And she said, I'm really bummed. Like, I started this job and it's probably like the easiest job ever. I'm not having to do a whole lot like brain wise. It's, but my back was like killing me after my first couple days there. And so we got to talking about that a little bit and trying to ask questions to her to get to kind of the root of what may have initiated that pain response, because she had been feeling really good up to that point. And I asked her, I was like, so when you're taking someone's blood pressure, are you like squatting way down? Are you bending from your back? Are you hinging from the hips? Are you sitting on a chair? Like, what are you doing? And she was like, well, yeah, I'm probably bending from my back the whole time. So with scoliosis, if you've been listening to this for any length of time, you have these areas in your curve called your transition zones. And that's the spot where your curve is changing directions. So it's transitioning from maybe being a right curve in your thoracic spine to a left curve in your lumbar spine. And then that little area in between those two spots, that's considered your transition zone. And you may have a couple of those if you have several curves. So when we bend from the back, when we are doing those deep twists, like in yoga or side bends, we tend to move more often from the transition zones instead of the whole length of the spine, or distributing the movement all throughout the lumbar spine or all throughout the thoracic spine. It'll just kind of get isolated a bit more to that one or a couple of segments. And those areas tend to be kind of the pinpoint of where the majority of people experience pain. Because you also have to think about the other things that are happening with the curve. So it's not only that side bend that's happening, it's the three-dimensional nature of the curve. It's the rotation and the flexion, extension, all of it together. That's all changing from right to left and, whatever else is happening. And then you have that segment. So we're talking about how she could possibly move a little bit better to make that area feel less painful throughout the day. So a couple of suggestions to her were either squatting the whole way down and sitting on her haunches, never know if I'm saying that right. So that's basically squatting as far as you can and resting your bottom on your heels. Another alternative is finding a stool, like a rolling chair, and just, having a seat for each person. That way that it's a little bit easier to maintain that neutral spine. And then the third alternative is hinging from the hips. So making sure that you're keeping the spine nice and flat or in a neutral alignment, and then pretend this is the hips. I'm pointing at my wrist. You hinge from here instead of here. Okay. So those are just some things that tend to come up with clients that I work with. That's the nice thing about having either one-on-one attention or small group attention, where we're able to meet on a weekly basis and kind of brainstorm some things that come up, as you're living your life, because who knows how long she would have just kind of continued in discomfort and frustration, not knowing like why her back was hurting. It sometimes helps a lot to have somebody else's eyes and ears to give you some feedback as to what might be causing your discomfort. On to today's topic of the day is aging with scoliosis. So some things to look out for when you are in your 20s. Your 20s are kind of the years where you are in college. You might be getting married at this point. I feel like things have changed so much since I was in my 20s. I feel like when I was in my 20s, everybody was getting married. Everybody was like having babies in their 20s. Now that's a bit later in life. So I'm going to try to keep it relevant to today's culture and world. So in your 20s, you're beginning your career. You are possibly like having your own house, things like that. Some things to keep in mind when you're choosing a career. So if you have a desk job, some things to consider are your desk setup. So making sure that you have a great chair, investing in that right away so that 10 years down the road, you're not, in excruciating discomfort and, really suffering from having a sedentary job. Having a desk that is able to elevate and go down so that you can stand in alternate positions throughout the day, really making sure that if that's the type of job that you choose, that you are kind of setting yourself up for success with that. And if you have like more of an active career that you're choosing to do, so that could be nursing, that could be even something like being a firefighter or a police officer, in extreme situations, those jobs are very physical. Making sure that you're training and preparing your body for those jobs and those careers. So also, this is the time when you are establishing habits in your life, and these habits carry over into the remainder of your life. And it's easier to begin habits sooner than it is to implement them later. So establishing a routine and active lifestyle in your 20s. So trying to do some daily outdoor walks. The reason this is so beneficial for someone with scoliosis, or even without scoliosis, but especially with scoliosis, getting vitamin D. So if you can walk outdoors and get that natural sunlight on a daily basis, that's really, really helpful to prevent potential osteoporosis in the future. And as I've talked about before, we're more predisposed to developing osteoporosis if we have scoliosis. And establishing a strength training routine. So building slabs of muscle on your body are really, really important to counter a lot of different diseases, but also with scoliosis, it's really essential to countering pain. So you're going to have a stronger core as a result of lifting weights, and that's going to provide you a really solid foundation to be able to hold yourself in more of an aligned neutral position. Instead of hanging out in your curve, you're able to hold yourself more upright for longer periods of time without fatiguing. And then moving into your 30s, some things that tend to happen in your 30s, you are getting possibly getting married, having children in your 30s. And, this is also another kind of transition time for a lot of people. You're getting more established in your career, or maybe even switching careers. So with scoliosis, you want to make sure that you are preparing yourself for pregnancy and getting as strong as you can. Also having as much awareness as possible and understanding of your curve as possible, entering into those new life phases. So I have a whole couple of podcast episodes, maybe 3, on preparing for pregnancy and birth, and afterwards recovering from your pregnancy. So all of those things are super essential in your 30s, because that can be another time when your curve progresses. So when a woman has scoliosis, there's 3 times in their life that their scoliosis can progress. The first is puberty, the second one is pregnancy, and the third one is menopause, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. So in your 30s, and when you are preparing for pregnancy or pregnant, you have hormones that are released called relaxin, and it allows your joints and your body to open up and prepare yourself for your pregnancy and for your delivery. Wonderful, beautiful, essential thing that needs to happen. But also it can be really uncomfortable for people that have scoliosis and aren't ready for that to happen and aren't prepared. If you're not aware of your curve or your corrections, those discomforts that you might have baseline will be enhanced. And then also your likelihood for that curve to progress is enhanced if you're not aware of those things beforehand. So again, strength training, doing some scoliosis specific work in preparation for that is really essential. And then in your 40s, some things to be aware of. In your 40s, this is when we start to begin losing muscle density naturally. So that kind of is a turning point there in your 40s. So up to that point, you're able to build muscle pretty easily over time. You can build muscle at any point in your life, even in your 90s. So don't mishear me here. But it does take a little bit more of an effort. So if you've been preparing for all of this up to this point, if you've already established a strength training routine, you've built some muscle memory, so it's a bit easier to maintain that. with that said, when you're in your 40s, it's really important for you to be doing some resistance training in addition to your daily walks, in addition to your scolio exercises, making sure that you are really being diligent with strength training. This is also the premenopausal point for a lot of people. And this is, another time where your hormones are changing and shifting around a bit. So it's really important to be in communication with your doctor about what is actually happening with your hormones, so that you can preventatively either counteract that with supplements or with your nutrition, with your diet, in order to prepare for what's to come. So this is when, your bone density also starts to decrease, and it can present some issues. And then in your 50s, kind of that menopausal situation continues to perpetuate. And another thing that's kind of added in is a loss of balance. So balance, if we don't practice it, if we're not working on cultivating that and developing it, it decreases over time for a number of reasons. So the sensation in your feet tends to be less as you age. What's the word I'm looking for? Your vestibular system. So your inner ear, it tends to have some changes that happen within the density of the fluid within your inner ear, and that impacts your balance as well. Your vision starts to decrease. Most of us rely very heavily upon our vision for our balance. And if you're a client of mine, you'll definitely know if you rely upon your vision for your balance or not, because when we're practicing balance, I always have you do it in different conditions. So you're doing some things with your eyes open, and then usually it's, pretty good. And then you close your eyes, and a lot of people really struggle with their balance once their vision is taken away, because then you're relying upon your inner ear and the sensation in the feet, and then your proprioception as well. So all of those systems decrease over time, their reactivity and their efficacy. So it's really important to be practicing your balance on a daily basis, especially in your 40s. And then when you hit your 50s, actually, was that just the 50s? I think I was just talking about the 50s. Now I'm getting a little thrown off. That was the 50s. So, all of those systems just continue to need a little bit more TLC over time. So kind of the summary of today's talk is, first, making sure that you understand your curve and how to position yourself, how to find your auto corrections. That's essential. And then at each stage, just kind of keeping your eyes peeled and being prepared for some of the things that you may encounter. So 20s, more career life changes. 30s, pregnancy, marriage, things like that. 40s, premenopause. 50s, balance. And then beyond, it's really just trying to stay active and keeping the routine that you've tried to establish. So staying as active as possible. There is no age that is too late to make changes. So I've said this so many times, but I work with people who are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they are making incredible improvements in their scoliosis curve and their baseline posture, in the way that they're feeling, in their function. So keeping that in mind, that if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I really missed the boat, you have not missed the boat. It's never too late to begin working on your scoliosis, feeling better, and living your life to its full potential. I really hope that you took some great takeaways from this episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure that you give us a rating on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And if you're interested in working on your scoliosis, the best way to do that is the small group scoliosis coaching. It provides you with a wonderful team of people who are in your corner and cheering you on. You get the community, you get the accountability, and you really see a lot of progress. I hope to see you and be with you next time. Until then, stay ahead of the curve.